What if the most powerful man in the room was not the one speaking, but the one remaining silent? What if the real strategist never posted, never shouted, never sought attention, yet controlled the outcome of every decision? This is the paradox of Niccolo Machiavelli. If he were alive today, he would not be chasing likes, followers, or recognition. He would be invisible, and because of that, he would be untouchable. In an age obsessed with visibility, his greatest advantage would be invisibility. And today we will dissect 21 psychological rules that reveal how Machiavelli would outsmart everyone in the modern world. The first principle is deceptively simple. Allow others to underestimate you. Modern culture rewards noise. People compete to prove their intelligence, their credentials, their influence. But Machiavelli understood that the strongest position is often the quietest. By entering last, by observing before speaking, by holding back until the right moment, he would gain the ultimate leverage. When others believe you are harmless, they drop their guard. And when their defenses are down, one calculated move is enough to seize control. In psychology, this mechanism is called disarming bias. People reveal the most when they believe no threat is present. To be underestimated is not weakness. It is the cover that allows strength to act without resistance. His second rule reflects a fundamental truth about human perception. Charm is often more powerful than truth. In hyper-connected societies, what spreads is not accuracy, but appearance. Machiavelli would exploit this relentlessly. He would not spend energy proving integrity. Instead, he would construct the illusion of goodness, smiling in boardrooms, offering praise, projecting charisma. The brilliance lies in understanding that persuasion does not require honesty, it requires believability. When people crown you as the hero, they surrender their defenses. This echoes a well-documented bias in behavioral science, the halo effect, where likability overshadows flaws. By mastering charm, Machiavelli would not need to fight truth. He would simply outshine it. The third principle is deliberate ambiguity. Most individuals strive to be clear and consistent. Machiavelli would reverse this instinct. He would alternate between warmth and coldness, silence and intensity, generosity and distance. The goal is not confusion for its own sake, but the psychological fixation it creates. Humans are naturally drawn to patterns. When the pattern breaks, the mind obsesses over explanation. This is why ambiguous figures become magnets of attention. Our brains cannot resist solving the puzzle. In practice, ambiguity turns a person into an enigma, and enigmas are far more influential than those who are easily understood. Ambiguity forces others into your orbit, compelling them to interpret, analyze, and overvalue your every move. The fourth rule is to control what others see while concealing what you do. In a world where everyone broadcasts their every move, posting updates, showcasing progress, building brands, exposure is vulnerability. Once people see your methods, they prepare counter moves. Machiavelli would adopt the opposite approach, project transparency, while guarding substance. Appear open, yet operate ruthlessly in the shadows. Psychology labels this impression management the art of shaping perception without disclosing reality. To reveal less is to protect strategy. To guard the mechanism is to preserve power. Finally, his fifth rule combines theater with subtlety. Construct a mask, then allow it to fracture. Perfection is forgettable. Controlled flaws, however, are magnetic. By building the image of calm confidence, then allowing a brief crack, a sudden burst of vulnerability, an unexpected sharp remark, he would leave observers unsettled. People chase what they cannot fully grasp. In behavioral terms, this is the principle of curiosity gaps. When the story feels incomplete, the audience pursues the missing piece. By offering 90% and withholding 10%, Machiavelli would secure lifelong attention. not because people admire the mask, but because they hunger for what lies behind it. In these first 5 principles, a coherent pattern emerges. The less you reveal, the more power you hold. Machiavelli's genius lies not in dominance through force, but in mastery of perception. He would transform invisibility into the most potent weapon of influence. The 6th principle reinforces a timeless psychological weaponspeak less than necessary. In modern life, endless talk is mistaken for intelligence, yet over-explanation exposes weakness. The more someone speaks, the clearer their insecurities become: the need for validation, the fear of being misunderstood, the desperation to appear competent. Machiavelli would never waste words to gain approval. He would use language sparingly with precision, as if each sentence were a scalpel. By stopping before clarity, he forces others to fill the silence with their own projections. This creates psychological tension. People begin asking themselves, what does he know? Why is he silent? Silence becomes not emptiness, but a stage for fear. Negotiators know this well. Strategic pauses often achieve what arguments cannot. In Machiavelli's hands, silence would not be passive. It would be an active instrument of control. The 7th rule blurs the boundary between friend and foe. People in today's hyper-connected world crave clarity: who is loyal, who is dangerous, who can be trusted. Machiavelli would deny them this certainty. He would praise rivals in public, sit with enemies in private, and defend those he secretly intended to remove. The ambiguity is not weakness. It is camouflage. When others cannot classify you, they relax. And relaxed opponents are unprepared opponents. This principle reflects dual process thinking. Humans seek binary categories: ally or enemy, safe or unsafe. When the signal is mixed, the brain stalls in uncertainty, leaving space for manipulation. Machiavelli would weaponize neutrality, smiling, until the moment his absence became the sharpest weapon. The 8th principle follows naturally: make others feel secure right before seizing power. This is the psychology of betrayal at its most devastating. If you fight openly, people resist. But if you mirror their language, echo their beliefs, and reinforce their sense of control, they never see the strike coming. The key is mimicry, one of the most effective rapport-building techniques in behavioral psychology. By reflecting tone, gestures, and ideas, trust is manufactured. And when trust is complete, removal is effortless. Betrayal works best, not when it shocks, but when it feels impossible until the moment it happens. Machiavelli's mastery would lie in disguising conquest as cooperation until it is too late. The 9th principle addresses dependency. Power thrives when others cannot function without you. Rather than threats, Machiavelli would create reliance, solving problems no one else can, providing insights no one else dares, becoming the irreplaceable presence. But the brilliance lies in withdrawal. Once dependency is formed, the sudden absence destabilizes the dependent far more than open conflict ever could. Psychology describes this as variable reinforcement. Like an addiction, the sudden removal of support intensifies desire. By stepping back at the peak of dependency, Machiavelli would ensure others spend years chasing what they once took for granted. The 10th rule transforms generosity into leverage, weaponized favors. Most individuals give to be liked, but Machiavelli would give to establish debt. A favor is not kindness, it is a chain. When you accept help, a subtle imbalance is created, a psychological weight pressing for repayment. This is the law of reciprocity, one of the most powerful behavioral drivers. But Machiavelli would not demand repayment directly. He would allow the imbalance to grow until it shaped behavior. Even a single reminder: remember that time is enough to reactivate guilt and restore dominance. Favors, when used strategically, are not gifts. They are obligations that grow heavier with time. Across these next 5 principles, the theme deepens control is not about confrontation, but about psychological imbalance. By speaking less, creating uncertainty, manufacturing safety, fostering dependence, and converting favors into chains, Machiavelli would thrive in today's competitive arenas. He would not dominate by shouting louder or moving faster. He would dominate by ensuring that others tied themselves to him without realizing the knot could never be undone. The 11th principle dismantles the myth that loyalty comes from kindness. In Machiavelli's framework, loyalty is manufactured through complicity. He would never demand devotion directly. Instead, he would allow individuals to betray others on his behalf. Perhaps they share a secret they should not, or they criticize someone to win his approval. Once they cross that line, they are bound. Why? Because betrayal creates investment. They must now defend him to protect themselves from exposure. This reflects a principle in behavioral economics known as the sunk cost fallacy. Once someone has invested in a choice, even a destructive one, they are reluctant to abandon it. By permitting betrayal instead of asking for loyalty, Machiavelli creates ties that are difficult to sever. The 12th rule escalates this to the collective dismantle alliances from within. Instead of confronting groups directly, Machiavelli would erode their cohesion subtly. He would whisper suspicions, plant doubts, and exploit insecurities. He would identify the strongest bonds in a network and infect them with uncertainty. Once suspicion takes root, the alliance decays without direct attack. This reflects a fundamental principle of social psychology: trust. Once broken, rarely returns in full. A single seed of doubt can collapse an entire group dynamic. Machiavelli would not need to fight the alliance. He would let the alliance fight itself. The 13th principle is psychological mirroring of a darker kind. Reflect insecurities back at others. Instead of confrontation, he would offer carefully phrased comments that acknowledge a person's doubts. You always seem to succeed, even when others underestimate you. Such remarks confirm hidden fears while framing them as compliments. The brilliance lies in soft manipulation. When individuals feel understood, especially in their vulnerabilities, they attach themselves to the source of that validation. This echoes attachment theory in psychology. People bond most strongly with those who acknowledge their hidden anxieties. By presenting himself as the one who truly sees them, Machiavelli would transform insecurity into obedience. The 14th rule is about the illusion of clean hands. In ruthless decisions, Machiavelli would never be the one visibly holding the knife. He would orchestrate, influence, provoke, and then step aside before action is taken. Someone else would deliver the blow, someone else would carry the blame. He knew that the executioner creates enemies, but the orchestrator collects power. This principle mirrors modern organizational politics. The leader who avoids direct confrontation often rises higher because their fingerprints are absent from the damage. The illusion of innocence is as valuable as actual innocence. The 15th principle refines the art of silence: say nothing and let others reveal everything. In noisy environments filled with arguments, debates, and endless speech, silence becomes a weapon. When you do not respond to insult, when you do not rush to answer questions, when you remain still, others overcompensate. They speak more, reveal more, and expose vulnerabilities. Silence provokes projection. The opponent writes a narrative in their own mind, fearing what you might know or intend. In negotiation studies, this is known as the discomfort of unfilled space. People rush to fill silence, often with information they did not intend to disclose. Machiavelli would master this art, controlling conversations not by speaking but by listening so intently that others destroy themselves with their own words. Together, these 5 rules show how Machiavelli would weaponize psychology at both the individual and collective level. Loyalty is forged through shared guilt. Alliances collapse through whispers, Insecurities become tools of control, actions are executed by others, and silence becomes the sharpest interrogation. This is not the power of brute force. It is the power of shaping behavior from within. The 16th principle is unpredictability applied with precision. Machiavelli would not advocate for erratic behavior, which signals instability, but for calculated unpredictability in moments that matter most. Predictability is a vulnerability. If others can forecast your reactions, they can manipulate or counter them. By occasionally breaking expected patterns, sometimes forgiving, sometimes disappearing, sometimes engaging, and sometimes ignoring, he creates uncertainty. This uncertainty translates into fear, not because of aggression, but because of unreadability. In psychology, this parallels intermittent reinforcement, the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive when outcomes cannot be predicted. People become fixated, waiting for the next move. Machiavelli's unpredictability would not weaken him. It would paralyze those around him. The 17th rule explores presence beyond physical space. To truly dominate, one must make their influence felt even in absence. Machiavelli would achieve this by imprinting himself so deeply on people's decisions and judgments that his voice lingers when he is not there. This is the psychological principle of internalized authority. Teachers, parents, or mentors who shaped us early in life remain in our minds long after they are gone. Machiavelli would intentionally construct this effect, ensuring that every hesitation, every choice, every celebration is filtered through the shadow of his judgment. In this way, he would not need to be present to exert control. He would live as a standard others cannot ignore. The 18th rule is one of subtle intimidation. Never threaten directly. Let fear do the work. A threat activates resistance. People prepare defenses when danger is explicit. But if fear is ambiguous, if they only suspect what you might do, it multiplies in their imagination. This is the psychology of projection. Uncertainty breeds exaggerated expectations of harm. By refusing to say, "I will destroy you," and instead letting silence or small gestures imply possibilities, Machiavelli would make others paralyze themselves with speculation. Fear born from imagination is more corrosive than fear born from information. The 19th principle refines the art of revenge delay until the impact is devastating. Quick retaliation satisfies emotion but forfeits control because it allows the enemy to set the tempo. Machiavelli understood the deeper strategy: watch, wait, and let your opponent believe they have escaped consequences. Then, when the timing is most destructive, act decisively. This mirrors the psychological phenomenon of anticipatory anxiety. The fear of an uncertain future often does more damage than the event itself. By waiting, Machiavelli ensures his enemies suffer twice: first through paranoia, then through the eventual strike. Revenge for him is not about anger. It is about restoring dominance at the moment when it cannot be challenged. The 20th rule transforms the individual into something larger. Become a system, not just a man. Machiavelli knew that people can be replaced, but systems endure. To protect his influence, he would embed his ideas, methods, and structures into the very fabric of organizations. This is how legacies are built, not by personality cults, but by creating frameworks that function in one's absence. In modern terms, it is institutionalization, when your way of thinking becomes the standard others unconsciously follow. Even after removal, your presence survives in the rules, practices, and beliefs you engineered. At this stage, Machiavelli would not merely be feared, he would be indispensable. These 5 principles, when combined, elevate power from the visible to the permanent. By being unpredictable, shaping presence beyond absence, instilling fear without threats, delaying retaliation, until it devastates, and embedding himself into systems, Machiavelli would move from temporary strategist to lasting architect of control. His influence would outlive his actions. The final principle is the ultimate form of psychological dominance. Make them afraid to even speak your name. Recognition is temporary, but fear that lingers in silence is permanent. Machiavelli would not need to trend, shout, or broadcast. His legacy would live in whispers, in indirect references, in warnings shared without ever mentioning him explicitly. You know what happened last time? Don't end up like him. When people avoid invoking you, it is not because they forgot you, but because they cannot escape you. This is the transformation of presence into myth, and myth is stronger than memory. At this stage, influence transcends individual interactions. Machiavelli becomes an atmosphere shaping decisions even when absent, haunting the choices of others without lifting a finger. It is the essence of psychological power domination, not through visible force, but through invisible inevitability. Modern leaders who achieve this state no longer argue or persuade. Their reputation speaks in silence, and that silence governs behavior more effectively than any decree. Taken together, these 21 principles are not simply tactics for manipulation. They are a blueprint for understanding human psychology at its core. Our hunger for clarity, our fear of uncertainty, our addiction to approval, our vulnerability to absence, our dependence on perception. Machiavelli's genius lies in recognizing that people rarely act rationally. They act emotionally, defensively, impulsively. And his strategy exploits every one of those tendencies. Invisibility becomes armor. Ambiguity becomes gravity. Silence becomes a weapon. And reputation becomes an empire. So the question for us is not whether Machiavelli's rules can dominate today's world. It is whether we recognize when they are being used against us. Because in politics and business, and in daily life, the quiet strategist often wins while the loud competitor burns out. To protect yourself, you must learn to see the invisible hand before it closes around you.